The darkness of the old forest. Somewhere in the Carpathians, where mountain peaks blend with the sky and ancient forests tell tales of the past, lies a small village named Strakovec. This village has always been surrounded by mysteries and legends, but none were as terrifying as the story of the darkness of the old forest. Several centuries ago, this forest was ordinary, but everything changed when darkness came to it. According to legend, this happened after an unknown traveler in a black cloak came to the village. She stayed in the house of old Taras, known for his hospitality. "Who are you?" he asked, looking at her suspiciously. "I seek refuge from those who pursue me," she replied, not removing her hood. Taras agreed to give her shelter for one night. But the next morning, when he entered her room, the woman was gone. On the table remained only an ancient book with a leather cover and strange symbols on it. Taras decided not to touch the book and hid it away. But at night, when the village was plunged into darkness, the forest came alive. Strange sounds were heard, whispers that pierced the soul with fear. Villagers began to disappear one by one, leaving only traces of struggle behind. One of the young villagers, Andriy, was a brave lad and decided to figure out what was going on. He knew about the old book and turned to the local healer. "This book is cursed," said the healer. "It opens the door to darkness that devours all living things." Andriy decided that he must return the book to where it came from. Together with his friend Maria, they set off for the old forest. Every step deeper into the forest became harder. It seemed that the darkness itself opposed them, trying to capture their minds. "Don't give up," Andriy, Maria said, holding his hand. "We must finish this." Finally, they reached an old oak tree standing in the center of the forest. Its branches, like arms, stretched out to them, and in the roots was a dark chasm. Andriy realized that this place was the source of the evil. He opened the book and began reading the words written in an ancient language. The forest began to groan as if it were alive, and the darkness thickened around them. "We must do this," Andriy, Maria shouted, holding on to him. At the last moment, when it seemed that the darkness would swallow them both, Andriy read the last words of the spell. The book burst into bright light that consumed the darkness, and the forest became quiet again. Andriy and Maria returned to the village, but they were no longer the same. They knew that the forest still held many secrets, but the darkness had been defeated. Many years passed, and the new generation of Strakovec lived in peace. But the legend of the darkness of the old forest was still passed down from mouth to mouth. And every evening, when the sun set behind the mountains, the old villagers told their children, "Do not enter the old forest, for the darkness may return." This story became a warning to all that even in the most beautiful places, evil can hide. And although Andriy and Maria had long since left this world, their feet remained in the memory of the people as a symbol of the fight against evil and darkness. So ends the story of the darkness of the old forest, reminding us that true courage and friendship can overcome any evil. The Whispering Woods. Deep in the heart of the Whispering Woods, where ancient trees loomed like giants and shadows danced with the wind, there stood a cabin forgotten by time. The locals spoke of it only in hushed tones, warning travelers to steer clear after sunset. They said the cabin was cursed, haunted by the restless spirits of those who had vanished there centuries ago. One moonless night, a group of adventurous friends set out into the Whispering Woods, seeking the thrill of exploring the unknown. Among them was Sarah, a skeptic who scoffed at the tales of ghosts and curses. Leading the group was Jake, a thrill-seeker always eager to prove his bravery. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew thick with an unnatural silence. The trees seemed to whisper secrets to each other, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. Sarah felt a chill creep down her spine, but she dismissed it as nerves. They stumbled upon the cabin just as the first stars peeked through the canopy above. Its wooden frame creaked with age, the windows boarded shut, as if to keep something trapped inside. Jake laughed nervously, daring everyone to enter. Sarah hesitated, but the others egged her on, their voices echoing in the stillness of the night. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and decay. Cobwebs adorned every corner, and the floorboards groaned beneath their feet. The friends explored cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. Sarah's skepticism waned as unease settled over her like a shroud. It was then they heard it, the faintest whisper, like a breeze through leaves. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The others exchanged nervous glances, but Jake waved it off as the wind playing tricks. They pressed on, deeper into the cabin's heart. In the dim light of their flashlights, shadows danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. Sarah's skin prickled with dread as the whispers grew louder, filling the air like a chorus of lost souls. Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. They reached a room at the end of a dark corridor, its door half ajar. Jake, always eager to prove his fearlessness, pushed it open with a dramatic flourish. What they found inside froze them in their tracks, a circle of old, weathered dolls arranged in a macabre tableau. Each doll wore a faded dress, their glass eyes staring blankly ahead. The air grew heavy with a suffocating presence, and Sarah's skepticism shattered like glass. She could feel eyes watching them from the darkness, unseen and malevolent. Suddenly, the whispers turned into desperate cries, filling the cabin with anguish and despair. Shadows writhed on the walls, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes. Sarah's friends screamed, their voices drowned out by the cacophony of wails. In a panic, they fled the cabin, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. Sarah could feel a cold breath on her neck, icy fingers brushing her skin. She ran faster, terror lending wings to her feet. They burst out of the woods, gasping for air as the cabin disappeared behind them. The whispers faded into the night, leaving only the rustling of leaves and the distant howl of a lone wolf. As they caught their breath, Jake turned to Sarah, his bravado replaced by fear. I didn't believe," he stammered, his voice trembling. Sarah nodded silently, her eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. From that night on, they never spoke of the Whispering Woods again. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind howled through the trees, Sarah swore she could still hear the faint echoes of whispers in the darkness, reminders of the cabin's terrible secret, and the souls that still wandered its haunted halls. Years passed, and the memory of that night faded into the background of their lives. Sarah moved away, burying herself in work to forget the unsettling events of that fateful evening. Yet some things refused to stay buried in the past. One rainy autumn evening, Sarah received a letter in the mail. It was a faded envelope with no return address, sealed with wax stamped with an old-fashioned insignia. Curiosity mingled with apprehension as she broke the seal and unfolded the yellowed parchment inside. The letter was short and cryptic, a single sentence scrawled in elegant script: "Return to the Whispering Woods." Sarah's hands trembled as she read those words. Was it a prank, a sick joke orchestrated by someone who knew of her past? Or was there something more sinister at play, something that lurked in the shadows of her memories? Despite her rational mind urging her to ignore the letter, Sarah found herself drawn back to the Whispering Woods. She needed closure, needed to confront the lingering fear that had plagued her for so long. She arrived at dusk, the woods cloaked in an eerie twilight. The trees whispered their ancient secrets, their leaves rustling in anticipation. Sarah stood before the overgrown path leading to the cabin, her heart pounding in her chest. The cabin loomed before her, unchanged by the passage of time. Its windows remained boarded shut, as if sealing in the darkness that dwelled within. Sarah hesitated, her resolve wavering as memories of that night flooded her mind. But something compelled her forward, a need to unravel the mysteries that had haunted her for years. With each step, the whispers grew louder, echoing through the trees like a warning. Sarah pressed on, her breath hitching in her throat. She reached the cabin's doorstep, the wood worn smooth by centuries of neglect. The door stood before her, a barrier between her and the past she had tried so hard to forget. With trembling hands, she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the boarded windows, casting eerie shadows on the floor. The room was empty, save for a single object, an old, weathered journal lying on a rickety table. Sarah approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her ears. The journal was bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed with age. She opened it with trembling hands, revealing handwritten entries that spoke of dark rituals and forbidden knowledge. As she read, Sarah's blood ran cold. The journal belonged to a traveler who had stumbled upon the cabin centuries ago, a traveler who had sought to unlock the secrets of the Whispering Woods and paid the ultimate price. The entries detailed encounters with malevolent spirits and whispered of a curse that bound the cabin to the souls of the lost. Sarah's hands shook as she reached the final entry, written in shaky script. Beware the whispers that haunt these woods. They hunger for souls, craving release from their eternal torment. Leave this place, lest you become lost like me. With a shiver, Sarah closed the journal. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a vortex of despair. Shadows danced on the walls, taking shape and form as if reaching out to claim her. In a surge of terror, Sarah fled the cabin, the journal clutched tightly in her hands. She ran blindly through the whispering woods, branches clawing at her clothes and roots tripping her feet. The whispers pursued her, their voices merging into a chilling chorus that echoed trees. She emerged from the woods hours later, breathless and shaken. The journal lay forgotten in the dirt, its secrets buried once more in the depths of the whispering woods. Sarah never returned to those haunted woods again, but the memories lingered, haunting her dreams and whispering of a darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of reality. To this day, Sarah wonders if the spirits of the cabin still whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen, their voices carried on the wind through the whispering woods, a warning to all who tread too close to the darkness that dwells within. The curse of the old school. In a small Ukrainian village, there was an old school that had stood abandoned for over half a century. The school had a gloomy appearance, rusty gates, broken windows, and cracked walls. The locals avoided the place, as it had long been the subject of numerous eerie legends and rumors. Once, in the early 20th century, this school was the most prestigious in the area. The teachers were wise, and the students were capable. But one day during class, the school suddenly caught fire. The flames spread incredibly quickly, and many children and teachers perished in horrific agony. Since then, people said the school was cursed. However, this legend did not deter two young paranormal investigators, Oleg and Marina. They decided to visit the old school at night to film a video for their YouTube channel. Oleg was a skeptic, while Marina believed in the supernatural, making their duo always attract viewers' attention. The night was cold and dark. Only the faint light from their flashlights pierced through the thick fog. They stood before the entrance to the school, feeling a slight unease. Smiling, Oleg said, "Ready for an adventure?" Marina, feeling a chill down her spine, nodded. "Yes, but be careful. I've read that people have seen ghosts here." Oleg laughed. "That's just stories. But if we see any ghost, I promise I won't be scared." They opened the creaky door and went inside. It was even darker inside than they had expected. Marina took out her phone and started filming. "We're now in the old school," she spoke to the camera. "They say this place is cursed, and the ghosts of the children who died in the fire still wander the halls." They walked down a dark corridor, their footsteps echoing in the empty walls. Suddenly, Marina heard a faint child's laugh coming from ahead. "Did you hear that?" she asked, shivering. Oleg stopped and listened. "Yeah, but it's probably just the wind." They continued on their way. In one of the classrooms, they found an old blackboard with strange symbols chalked on it. Marina approached it and filmed it. "Strange, it's like someone wrote this recently," she said. Suddenly, the classroom door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Marina started to panic, but Oleg tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. "Stay calm," he said. "It's probably just an old door, stuck." But Marina felt that it wasn't just the door. Her heart was pounding harder, and she felt like someone was watching them. Then suddenly, a figure appeared in the corner of the room. It was a little boy in old-fashioned school clothes. He looked transparent and sad. "Who are you?" Marina asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "I'm Ivan," the boy replied. "I died here in the fire. I can't find peace." Oleg stood to the side, filming everything, not believing his eyes. He wanted to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. "Why can't you find peace?" Marina asked, trying to understand what the ghost wanted. "I must tell you the truth," Ivan said. "The fire wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. A teacher who hated children set the school on fire, and many died because of his anger and hatred." Marina and Oleg were stunned by this information. They didn't know how to react. "Why are you telling us this now?" Oleg finally found his voice. "Because you need to tell the world," Ivan said. "Only then can we find peace." Suddenly, darkness filled the room, and the ghost of the boy vanished. The door abruptly opened by itself. Marina and Oleg, wasting no time, ran out of the building. They were terrified, but also felt like they had done something important. When they returned home, Marina immediately started editing the video and preparing it for upload. They knew their subscribers would be shocked by what they saw. They told Ivan's story and how a terrible teacher had destroyed so many lives. The video quickly went viral. People from all over the world started discussing the curse of the old school. And finally, the souls of the children who had died found peace. But Oleg and Marina knew that this was only the beginning. The world is full of mysteries and the unknown, and they were ready for new adventures. However, when Oleg went to bed that night, he felt a cold breath near his ear. He turned and saw Ivan. "Thank you," the boy whispered and disappeared into the darkness. Oleg knew that their adventures in the paranormal world were just beginning. The Forgotten Mansion. On the outskirts of a small village stood an old, abandoned mansion surrounded by a high iron fence. It had been abandoned for many years, and the locals avoided it, recounting horrific stories associated with the place. Some spoke of ghosts wandering its corridors, others of a curse placed on anyone who dared to cross its threshold. Chapter 1. Encounter with the Unknown. Yulia, a young journalist from the big city, came to the village to write an article about local legends. She was always fascinated by mystical stories, hoping to find material for her new book. When the locals learned of her intentions, they tried to dissuade her. "You shouldn't go there, miss. The souls of the cursed live there," an old woman at the market said when Yulia asked about the mansion. But Yulia was not frightened. She thought the rumors were just the product of the villagers' superstitious imagination and that she would surely uncover the truth. The next day, gathering all necessary items, Yulia set off for the old mansion. As she approached the gate, she felt a cold breeze brush her skin. Despite the warm autumn day, an eerie silence hung over the mansion. The gates were locked, but this didn't stop the journalist. She climbed over the fence and headed to the main entrance. Chapter 2. Mysterious Sounds. Opening the creaky door, Yulia stepped into a dark hallway. The walls were covered in dust and cobwebs, and the floor creaked treacherously underfoot. She turned on her flashlight and walked further, inspecting old paintings and furniture. In every corner, there was a sense of something unseen, but Yulia tried to ignore it. Suddenly, a strange sound came from above. It was a knocking sound, as if someone was walking on the second floor. Yulia froze, trying to listen. The sound repeated, and she decided to go upstairs. The stairs led to a long corridor with several doors. The journalist carefully opened the first door and peeked inside. It was an old bedroom with a large bed and a mirror hanging on the wall. The room looked like it hadn't been touched for many years. Yulia walked to the mirror and almost screamed when she looked into it. A shadow was slowly approaching her from behind. She quickly turned around, but the room was empty. Her heart began to beat faster, but she decided to continue her exploration. The missing residence. Yulia continued to explore the mansion, opening one room after another. Each room had something strange. Old toys left on the floor, books scattered on tables, and clothes hanging in closets as if their owners had vanished suddenly. In one of the rooms, she found an old diary. Opening it, she began to read. "Today I saw him again. He walks the corridors at night, not letting me sleep. I fear this curse will never end." The text further was almost illegible, but Yulia understood that the mansion's residents had been haunted by some evil. She put the diary aside and decided to check the basement mentioned in the entries. Chapter 4. The Secret of the Basement. Finding the basement door, Yulia descended the stairs. The basement was cold and damp, with a heavy smell of mold. She turned on her flashlight and saw old chests and shelves filled with various items. In one corner, she noticed a wooden door locked with an old padlock. Yulia took a small crowbar from her backpack and began to break the lock. After several blows, the lock gave way and the door opened. She entered and saw an old altar with strange symbols drawn on the wall. In the center of the altar lay a black book with a heavy cover. Yulia carefully picked it up and began to examine it. The book was written in an ancient language, but some pages had illustrations clearly depicting sacrifices and rituals. She realized that this book was the source of the curse hanging over the mansion. Awakening the evil. Suddenly, the basement began to fill with a strange sound. It was like a whisper coming from the walls. Yulia felt the hair on her arm stand on end. She decided to take the book and leave the basement, but as she took a step back, the door slammed shut behind her. The flashlight began to flicker, and at that moment, Yulia saw a figure slowly approaching her. It was the same creature she had seen in the mirror. It came closer, and Yulia felt paralyzing fear. She tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The creature was almost upon her, and Yulia realized there was no escape. Chapter 6. Rescued by a Secret. Yulia screamed, and suddenly the basement door opened. An old man from the village stood in the doorway, holding an ancient amulet. "Stay away from her," he shouted, and the creature began to retreat. Yulia ran out of the basement, and the man closed the door behind her. "I told you not to come here," he said sternly, leading her out of the mansion. "This place is cursed. You shouldn't have entered." Yulia, still trembling, thanked him for saving her and left the mansion. She realized that some secrets are better left alone. The book remained in the basement, and the mansion continued to stand abandoned, holding its dark secrets of the past. Epilogue. Returning to the city, Yulia wrote her article but couldn't reveal all the details of what had happened in the mansion. Her readers were fascinated by the story, but only she knew how terrifying the encounter with the unknown had been. She decided to no longer seek adventures in abandoned places.